Imagine, imagine you meet a nice elderly woman who owns a boarding home in Sacramento, California, and welcomes recovering drug addicts, disabled people, and hard case people that others had given up on. She welcomed them with open arms and gave to charity, and no one would ever question if anyone went missing in her home. She was your typical looking elderly woman with what seemed like a kind heart who liked to dig graves in the backyard when no one was watching. Her backyard was a sanctuary, some would say. A sanctuary not for the living. Hi, I'm Jessie Stories, aka Jessie. If you made it this far, thanks so much for being here. If you're new here, I cover true crime disability content, something not many people are doing. This is the most vulnerable community and least talked about. I want to start and continue the conversation of human rights as it attains to those with disabilities. What inspired me to do this was I am currently in a true crime case. You can see the docuseries on Netflix called Escaping Twin Flames. And the attorney general in Michigan, because that's where Jeff and Shlia are right now, continuing to dig whatever other information they need right now. Hopefully they eventually do something, is my hope. I'll keep you up to date if I hear more things. And now back to this. I myself am a disabled person with autism and ADHD, so AUDHD for those who haven't heard of that. On top of that, PTSD, some of that comes from Twin Flames universe, and generalized anxiety disorder. I will handle every aspect of the disability community in true crime. That's why I call it true crime disability. You can check to see the link above of what cases, including historical 1939 Germany cases I've done. I encourage you, please go back and watch even the ones that maybe have only 10 views or 6 views or 5 views. Please give it a watch, share it with someone who would be interested, and the ones with lower views and the ones with higher views, just keep sharing. And thanks so much for being here. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below and share with a friend to help make the channel thrive and bring about the conversation of disabilities and true crime. If you haven't already, make sure to show some love. Just to repeat again, some love to the true crime disabilities with little views. Give them a watch and share them. Thanks so much. It's very much appreciated. And as I always say, please do your own research and form your own opinion. Your opinion matters. All right. So the name of the elderly person that I was describing, I didn't want to give her a face or anything. In this case, I'm gonna have to, which sucks. I did give her, I guess, somewhat of a face in the opening, but this time around, we're gonna focus on the victims, and there isn't pictures of all of them. There was an actual elderly, fun fact, does count as disabled, is part of the disabled community. And so, yeah, it's kind of interesting since this serial killer is counted in that category herself. This was an interesting case for me, and believe me, there will be more interesting cases. I don't like this serial killer at all and what she did, but let me just start and let you guys figure out and form your own opinion. This is mine. Dorothy Puente was an elderly woman who was coercively controlling people at their lowest points in life, whether drug addiction, loss of a loved one, or someone with disabilities less likely to be missed if they suddenly were gone and never seen again. Her beginning of this started January 16th, 1982. Dorothy met Malcolm Mackenzie in a bar. He was age 74. Dorothy, being the great elderly citizen she is, helped him back to his apartment, as he may have passed out, in my personal opinion, from being drugged by her. Later, he reported to the police that she had slipped something in his drink to steal his coin collection, expensive jewelry, and watches that were all missing. This is just the first instance. Here comes the second. By April 28th, 1982, Ruth Monroe was found dead due to the overdose of codeine at Dorothy's home. Shortly prior, her husband had died at the age of 61 years old. Her family helped her move in at Dorothy's boarding. So she's 61 years old, Ruth Monroe. Her husband had died earlier. I tried writing it out, but I'm seeing where I messed up in my own writing. But he had died earlier. And then she moved in, I guess, out of loneliness and maybe not wanting to bother family. She moved in with Dorothy. And this is just me coming up and guesstimating based off of what I read and watched because she was on a lot of news things, which she should have not gotten as much attention as she did, Dorothy. Anyways, so Ruth Monroe moved in with Dorothy. Well, moved into her boarding home and was perfectly healthy elderly woman, reports say. Her family members said she was perfectly fine, but noticed she started drinking something she never did before, as in she never drank alcohol or anything. And her son spoke of in an interview seeing her before she died holding a mug that seemed like it had whiskey in it. I could be wrong about the whiskey part, but it seemed like she was drinking something. She never did before moving in to Dorothy's home. 2 weeks prior, on April 25th, she said to friends, quote, "I feel sick, like I'm going to die," only for her to die 3 days later. Originally, her death was counted as undetermined overdose, meaning the coroner couldn't decide if it was intentional since she lost her husband but still had her children, or unintentional, not on purpose. It wasn't until later in time that the coroner determined it a homicide. On May 16th, 1982, at age 49 years old, so another Dorothy, but her name is Osborne, so we'll focus on her last name, Osborne. After Dorothy Puente had come to visit her and fixed her a drink in her home, she found checks, credit cards, and other expensive items missing only 8 hours after Punta had left after visiting her. The consequence of Dorothy Punta's action led to 3 grand theft charges. She thankfully was sentenced to 5 years in prison. She was state paroled until March 21st, 1986. It was extended until 1990. During her time incarceration, she started talking to Everson Theodore Gilmont, a 77-year-old retiree from Oregon. The conversation may have been about him moving into her boarding house, because September of 1985, Gilmouth arrived at Punta's house with his truck and trailer, ready to move in. After serving only half her sentence, on September 9th, 1985, she was released, which wasn't serving anyone justice at this point in time. I personally believe she would have stayed. If she would have stayed, this would have prevented what was coming next. I feel very strongly about that. Later in time, Punta wrote to Gilmont's sister telling her that they were going to be married November 2nd, 1985. Not too long after that, she hired a handyman named Ismael Carrasco Flores to remodel some of her old home. She asked him to build a 6-foot by 30-inch storage box in exchange for Gilmont's truck and $800 payment. The day after he finished making the box, he noticed it had been nailed shut. Punta asked Flores to help her move the box, which weighed 300 pounds, to a storage location in California. It was left near Sacramento River on January 1st, 1986. A fisherman discovered the box. Out of being concerned, he let authorities know what he found and the location. The authorities found a severely decomposed body inside, wrapped in several plastic bags, covered by a bed sheet and electric tape, mouthballs, and toilet deodorizer placed in the box to keep the death stench from coming out. It wasn't until 2 years later, on December 28th, 1988, the body was identified as Galmont. Punta, I don't know how to say her last name. Dorothy Punta had mailed forged letters to convince his sister that he was still alive, which is twisted and gross, in my personal opinion. She continued cashing Gilmont's benefit check till July 1986. In the fall of 1986, Punta welcomed Betty Mae Palmer, age 78, moved into Punta's boarding house, October 14th, 1986. And why I'm just reading it off is because she did 9 out of 10 of her tenants she murdered by giving them drinks filled with, you'll get to hear about all the different drugs that she gave them. Some of them were some that they already were prescribed. Some of them weren't. And if you're seeing the pattern already, she tends to go towards elderly or widowed or just disabled. There was one confirmed disabled. You'll get to hear about him. But every person I read up on, there wasn't a lot of information, sadly, on them. I'm trying my best with the very little information I have to make this channel more victim-oriented versus highlighting. So Dorothy, in this case, I'm not highlighting her. I'm trying to highlight the people she killed to the best of my abilities with seeing the consequence of her, kind of like what I did with John So this isn't going to be that long of a one, but let me continue on Betty Mae Palmer and her short-lived life thanks to Punta. And she may have made this look like mercy killings, in my personal opinion. Dorothy, the serial killer grandma, she may have made this seem like, oh, they were elderly, we're gonna die any day now, or oh, they were disabled, or they were gonna die anyways. I don't know what the thought was, but those are all the different scenarios I can think of in my head. But anyways, welcome to my ADHD, and I'll always point it out when I do that, but I'm not gonna change. I will keep my ADHD going on. All right, anyways, so Betty Mae Palmer moved in October 14th, 1986. And Punta obtained a California ID with her photo and Palmer's name on it, which is weird. So that means she went to the license plate. So she somehow got Palmer's, Betty's birth certificate, social security number, and more, and went and got a California ID in order for her to receive her benefits, her disability benefits, or Social Security, I assume in this case, benefits, but I'm gonna go with Social Security considering she was 78 years old. Anyways, it's very sickening and gross that she did this. 2 months later, Palmer's Social Security checks address changed to Punta's address, so it would have been December in 1986. Punta's address, and these checks were worth $7,000. And they belonged to Palmer, not Punta, but they now belong to Dorothy Punta. By November 1988, half of the dismembered Palmer was found in a shallow hole in Punta's backyard. Palmer's head, hands, and lower legs were never found, which is devastating for her sister. Toxicology, which you should pay attention each time I describe this, so you can see the pattern too. That's why I wrote this down, so you can start to see the pattern yourselves. If you don't, I'll repeat them after we go through a couple more of them. So her toxicology reports revealed the presence of doxylamine, which is a sleep aid for those with insomnia or trouble sleeping, also found in parts of her body, which were prescribed medications of haloperidol and flurazepam. Flurazepam. I can't say these drugs that well, but that's okay. You can enjoy me struggling, which these are still all sleep aids and pain medication. The flurazepam is a theme, to let you guys know ahead of time. The body was identified as Palmer January 24th, 1989. Then came October 21st. Most of the people that moved in to her boarding home in the month of October. I'll let you guys see that for yourselves too. Then came October 21st, 1986. Punta summoned a notary to the hospital that Leona Carpenter, 78, who had suffered flurazepam overdose, which is another sleep aid prescribed to people that have trouble sleeping. She was given power of attorney over Carpenter and had begun cashing Social Security checks just 10 days later. Carpenter was still living during this time period. By December, after Carpenter was released from the hospital, she went to live with Punta. Once again, Palmer went to the hospital only to be released 2 weeks later, being discharged. By February 1987, she was nowhere to be found and just disappeared off the face of the earth. In November of 1988, her body was found in the corner of Punta's yard, and Carpenter's brain tissue showed presence of codeine, diazepam, and flurazepam. The string of deaths continue from here, but remember November 1988 as an important date we will swing back to in each death. In February 1987, James Gallup, age 62, moved into Palmer's house on July 20th, 1987. A potential malign tumor was found in his colon. He agreed to do further testing, but Punta later contacted his doctor on his behalf, telling them he had gone to Los Angeles. Gallup's body was found buried under a gazebo in Punta's backyard in November of 1988. Toxicology showed presence of amsubline, northabline, phentyline, and flurazepam. A lot of the drugs are hard to read, just so you know. I'm doing my best. In July 1987, Eugene Gamble, age 58, was found dead of a apparent suicide, having overdosed on amsubline and ethanol. Punta said he had a history of suicide attempts, which was, in fact, her covering her own tracks of killing Gamble, in my personal opinion, though she was never charged for his death, which is not justice at all. October 2nd, 1987, Farrah Faye Martin, 61 years of age, was sent to live with Punta. By October 5th of 1987, Punta forged Martin's number of Social Security checks totaling $7,000. Do you see a theme even in money here? By October 19th, 1987, Martin failed to contact her daughter on her birthday, which it was normal for her to contact her daughter on her birthday. It was unusual she hadn't called her that day. By November 1988, Martin's body was found buried under a metal shed with toxicology reports of fluorazepam in her brain and liver. October 21st, 1987, Dorothy Miller, 65, so we'll call her Miller because another Dorothy, was placed in an upstairs flat at Punta's home. She was introduced to introduce Punta to Ricardo Ardica, who followed in November 1987, became the representation payee for Miller's Social Security benefit just weeks after her arrival. Miller just vanished like she was never there to begin with, but November 20th, 1987, Punta hired a carpenter cleaner to remove large pile of disgusting smelling slime in Miller's room. Punta continued to forge Miller's checks, totaling $11,000. After she was no longer at her house, Miller's remains were later discovered buried under a slab of concrete near some rose bushes in her backyard. Miller's brain contained fluorazepam and carbamazepam. On November 29th, 1987, Brenda Trujillo sent a letter to the Social Security office of Sacramento accusing Punta of stealing her Social Security checks, totaling $3,500. Trujillo had met Punta in Sacramento County Jail in 1982 and later in time became cell buddies. After her release, she moved in with Punta at her boarding house. Trujillo claimed that Punta had drugged her and called her parole officer, resulting in her parole being unable to get her security checks. They seemed to not believe Trujillo's story, but with all the suicide and deaths in Punta's house, why not believe her? Because she's a woman, and in my personal opinion, an ex-convict, so not so many things in her favor to begin with. It would have been nice if someone believed her, so Punta could have been put back in prison. Just what I feel, because this went on for too long. She killed practically all her tenants. She was known as the landlady killer. In February 1988, Alvaro Bert Gonzalez Montoya, age 51, moved into Punta's house as a disabled adult with the mind of a child. People who knew him say no article actually says what he had, but by his description, maybe mentally challenged, but I could be wrong. By March, an application was filed designating Punta as the payee of Montoya's benefits. At the end of August, a roommate saw a man removing Montoya's clothes from a closet. Montoya was last seen on August 24th and missed an appointment. Punta said Montoya had gone to Mexico to visit his relatives. Social workers attempted to contact Montoya in September and October. Still, they had not heard from him. November 1988, Montoya's body was found adjacent from Carpenter's. His toxicology showed lexapine, fluorazepam, and many other drugs in his system. Most were ones prescribed to him, except for the one, carbamazepine. On March 9th, 1988, Benjamin Fink, age 55, was sent to live at Punta's. Fink's brother visited him every week for 6 weeks. By the end of April, Fink was nowhere to be seen. A tenant reported smelling a foul odor from his room. In June, Punta had a hole dug with 12 bags of cement to cover the hole in which Fink's body was found in November of 1988. His body was wrapped in plastic bed sheets secured with duct tape and blue pads. His toxicology found drugs to the rest of them, as they did with the rest of them. Dorothy Punta drugged her tenants, then dismembered some and buried them all. Thankfully, in December 10th of 1993, she was sentenced to life in prison for 9 deaths, though sadly she would die of natural causes in prison at the age of 82 years old, March of 2011. I don't feel justice was fully served here. She got away with plenty and died of natural causes and didn't allow others to live their life to the fullest. She took them and took their disability benefits with her. What do you think? What do you guys think? Was justice served? I think she was first put in prison in 1982. She should have stayed in prison. Those people would have had the opportunity to live their life to the fullest. And as I said, this is a shorter one. Thanks so much if you made it to the ending. I appreciate it, and for allowing me to do my script reading until I make it to the point of memorizing. I want to announce exciting news. My podcast will be launching January 7th, 2026, and will be playing every Wednesday at 7 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. I'll eventually leave links in the descriptions down below once listeners are up, because the first episode hasn't even been downloaded yet. You have the opportunity to download it January 7th. And I think I can copy a link that I'll try to do in the description down below, but not a guarantee. I have a lot more coming. And as a heads up, I'm going to kind of do my podcast similar to even the content of YouTube I do here. Pay attention for the very autistic way of doing things, which is pay attention to the pattern in both my channel for the true crime portion and for the unheard voices portion, because the podcast title is Jessie Stories, Unheard Voices. From silent voices to shining light, stories that inspire awareness and change. Thanks again for being here. Till next week. Peace. Bye, guys.